This is Unsiloed, brought to you by Alumni FM, connecting people through stories.
Welcome to Unsiloed. This is Greg LeBlanc, and I'm here today with Ayelet Fishbach, who is a professor at University of Chicago, Graduate School of Business, the Booth School, and also the author of this book right here, Get It Done, Surprising Lessons from the Science of Motivation. Now, I guess I should have said the young science of motivation, because it is a relatively young science. And I suppose, we could say it started out with, behavioralism, but we've come such a long way. And in this book, you describe a number of pieces of that science. In particular, you talk about, goal selection, goal achievement, goal juggling, and so forth. But what I find really interesting about the book is that you emphasize how people, in many ways, we kind of manipulate ourselves, right? So, in behavioral economics, we talk about how, how people are prone to all of these fallacies and biases and, make all these mistakes. But we sometimes forget that people are aware of them. They're aware of their own quirks, and they sometimes kind of, leverage these quirks. And in your book, you really kind of are very explicit about how you can kind of cultivate the landscape of motivation that you have within to better achieve your goals. And that's the aspect of the book I found really fascinating. So welcome, Ayelet.
Thanks for having me, Greg, and thanks for already talking about the doer and the planner and how they interact, and you're already full in. So I'm curious to know where our conversation is going to take us from here.
Well, I mean, I remember an example of this from my colleagues where they studied folks who went to the gym, and they seemed to overpay for their gym membership. If you look at it based on how many times they would go to the gym. And so, it seems like half the people, when they look at that, they say, oh yeah, these people are stupid. I mean, look, they're paying, $20 a visit when they could just pay $10 a visit. And then the other half of the people say, no, this is actually quite clever, because what they're doing is they're converting the marginal cost of going to the gym to zero, and thereby giving themselves a little extra boost. And I always wonder, why do some people sort of systematically fall on one side of that debate, and others seem to kind of fall on the other? I think you sort of understand both of those positions, and I don't think you have a dog in that fight. I think you're really sort of about, some people are aware of these things and some people aren't.
Yeah, well, I a few things here. I don't think that awareness is often the critical variable here. The question should be whether people are doing something that is adaptive for them, that serves their goals. And I think that as a field, we are probably too quickly to say that there is a mistake. We like to highlight people's mistakes, and often what we refer to as a mistake is quite adaptive. When people set deadlines that are unrealistic, well, it could be a mistake, it could be a planning fallacy, it could also be a way to motivate yourself. And often we are, as a field, as academics, too quick to call it a fallacy or a bias, and kind of neglect the fact that the early deadline was a motivational tool, that the pre-commitment meant to motivate someone to go to the gym. And maybe it has failed. Okay, maybe the person discovers by the end of the year that they only went 3 times, and that meant that they paid hundreds of dollars for each time that they went for the gym. But maybe the reason that they go to the gym is that they are more stingy than lazy, in which case this strategy works.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think the way you start the book is you say that sometimes the probability of achieving a goal is affected, at the outset based on how you define the goal or how you think about the goal. And that, when people I guess the classic case is, at the very beginning of the year, when people are, making their New Year's resolutions, right? If your New Year's resolution is kind of is too vague, then you're probably going to get a little bit. You're probably going to get less far down the goal than if you have like very precise objectives. So, I mean, when I was reading about a lot of this, I mean, sometimes you describe this in terms of individuals and their goal achievement, but because I teach management, I'm always thinking, yeah, but this is also true for when employers are trying to, get employees to do things, and also when parents are trying to get kind of kids to do something. So, tell us a bit more about, goal formulation, and how important is it that you kind of set the goals, initially from the very beginning in a way that increases the likelihood of you getting there.
Yes. So let me first say that I wrote the book thinking about how people can use the science of motivation to motivate themselves, but admittedly, most of the science is on how to motivate others. Okay, so most of the science is on managers motivating employees, educators motivating students, parents motivating their children. It's often where we go. Now, it's not everything. We do have research on self-control, which is how people motivate themselves. So there is this part, but it's not where we went as science, as a field over the last 20 years. Saying that, there is no reason that people cannot apply these lessons to themselves, in the sense that we can operate on ourselves the same way that we operate on someone else. Okay? If I want my 10-year-old to wake up in the morning, I open the curtain, and he's not going to sleep in a sunny room. Okay? It's easier to sleep in a dark room. Okay? If I want to wake up in the morning by myself, then I set an alarm clock, because it's harder to sleep in a noisy room than a quiet room. It's a trivial example, but I'm basically using the same principle to motivate someone else as I used to motivate myself. And now you're asking about how to best set a goal. And again, I would say it's the same for setting a goal for others and for yourself. And there are a few principles. We want the goal to be enticing, okay, to be something that we aspire to achieve, that seems more like a goal and less like a chore. So the problem with New Year's resolutions is that we often plan to be a different person that's going to be what's going. Let me step back. The problem with New Year's resolution is that we often plan to be a different person that is going to do what's important for her and not what she finds pleasurable, not what she's excited about. But the person we are is pursuing goals that are exciting, and less goals that seem like a chore, that are not exciting. And so the goal should be exciting. It should have ideally some specific target. Okay, so some numbers that defines how much and how soon. In general approach, do goals are better than do not goals. Avoidance, do not goals are good in the sense that they seem urgent. Just a second. Avoidance goals are good in the sense that they seem urgent. Approach goals are good in the long run. Okay, the goals that we can persist on. Intrinsic motivation is a big thing. Okay, so feeling motivated by doing and not necessarily only by achieving. Now, we set a goal because we want to achieve it, not because it is pleasant to pursue. We set a goal to finish an MBA degree and not to eat more ice cream. But the extent to which we are enthusiastic at the moment, that it feels good, that predicts adherence much more than how important is the goal in the long run. And so I'm touching just several principles in goal setting, and I didn't even get to incentives yet.
Well, I mean, is motivation the same? I mean, I think of motivation as overlapping with kind of willpower, or what people used to call kind of self-control, right? I mean, ancient Greeks would spend a lot of time talking about this, and later in the book you talk about self-control. But I mean, are these different mechanisms? I mean, when we think about approach and avoidance, right? Isn't it kind of the same force that we're dipping into when we're thinking about powering through to achieve something when maybe you don't really want to, or forcing yourself not to do something kind of when you really, really want to? Aren't they kind of, how are they the same and how are they different?
So they're the same in the sense that you just described. Okay, willpower is the power that you use to motivate yourself, to get yourself to do something. But they are different in the sense that we often think about willpower in the literature as well as in lay language is as self-control, okay, as overcoming yourself, as doing something that's hard to do, that you don't want to do, but that you can somehow get yourself to do, okay? Self-control is required when you have goal conflict, okay? When there is a goal that you want to pursue, but there is something else that stands in the way that you really want to do. You think that you should eat one thing, but you want to eat the other thing, okay? You think that you should control your temper, but you're tempted to just express how you feel. And these situations exist. They are not the entire field of motivation, and they're definitely often the situations that we are aware of because we are already failing, because it's already hard. In a way, we think about willpower when we are already struggling, when we already have something that goes against us, whereas many of the goals that we set are just intrinsically motivating and are just set such that we are excited about doing them. If we plan everything right, then we will be less aware of willpower, and it will be more like something that we do either because it's a habit or because it's exciting, it's fun, it's part of my purpose, what I want to achieve as a person.
Right. So, I mean, I'm thinking in terms of so many people are kind of swimming in a sea of distractions and stimuli, right? So whether it's the stream of news or games or whatever that's available on your phone, or whether it's the things that are available on television, or just particularly in this world, in the world of constant media that's available at the at the faucet, so to speak, that especially young people, they seem to just let hours and hours and hours go by, and they don't seem to be in pursuit of goals. They just seem to be in pursuit of getting through the next 30 seconds with some stimulus, and so in that case, if someone knew that they were kind of trapped in a sort of addictive spiral like that, would it be better for them to kind of psychologically focus on, hey, I gotta stop doing this, I gotta lock up the phone, or I need to find some pursuit that is so attractive to me that I don't even notice, or I'm not even aware of the temptations?
Yeah, I would say that the latter. So there are many things that we try to avoid in our daily life, and social media is definitely a big one. Okay? How do I get it off my phone and focus on what's important for me, what's more valuable? The problem is that if you set your goal as avoiding, as don't look at your phone, don't think about something, don't drink something, don't eat something, the mere goal brings to mind the thing that you should not do. Okay, when I set my goal as not going on social media, the way for me to know that I am successful is by asking, where are you on social media? And by that, bringing this to mind. Okay? And so it's kind of hard to pursue these goals where the way to check yourself is by reminding yourself of the thing that you're trying not to do. The other problem with avoidance goals, with don't do goals, is that they elicit reactance. Okay? We are often rebels. Okay? We want to do something just because we are not allowed to do that, even if we are the people who said that you are not allowed to do that. Some people have this feeling when you decide to go on a diet, and immediately you are so tempted by all the things that you resolve not to eat. Okay, you're rebelling against yourself. By the way, you can use this for good. Okay, so I'm being reminded of Chris Bryan's research that used reactants to get teenagers to reject junk food. And what he did in his studies was telling teenagers that marketers want them to eat junk food. Okay? And that there was all like these marketing campaigns trying to get you to eat the food that's unhealthy for you, and then get the reactants response. But now, going back to your question, the problem with avoidance goals is that they make us rebels. They bring to mind the thing that you should not do, and they're just not fun to pursue. So find another hobbies is better than stop obsessing on your current hobby.
But you also talk about kind of hands tying a little bit later in the book, where you can. Seems like there are certain people that know how to, constrain their choice set going forward, so that the range of choices include only the things that are in pursuit of the goal. So, for instance, with the phone, it would be sort of, putting the phone on silent mode, or maybe putting the phone sort of somewhere that's harder to reach, or doing something that would reflect some awareness of the fact that a lot of the activity is unchosen, right? So, are people are people sort of, how do people become better at that? Is that something that people become, educated about, or how do people learn to control themselves in that way? I think one of the examples you used is someone who you notice that some people push the wine glass away from themselves and kind of pull the water glass towards themselves, which is a subtle way of leveraging the fact that people kind of reach unthinkingly for the thing that's kind of closer to them.
Yes, and you can describe all of these strategies as basically making the goal more likely and the temptation less likely. Okay, and so you can buy more of the food that you want to eat and little of the food that you don't want to eat, so that you increase the presence of one and reduce the presence of others. You can pre-commit, and you started with an example of pre-commitment to avoiding temptation, okay, by putting the phone away, okay, or in my book I give the example of deleting the phone number of someone that you don't want to be in touch with, where by an economics analysis, well, just having the number there doesn't mean that you need to contact the person. It's an added option that you don't have to use, and presumably having options should not be a problem because you can always choose not to use these options. But by a psychological analysis, we know that there are certain people that we might be tempted to get in touch, and they are unhealthy for us. I give the example of trying to end a relationship that is unhealthy for the person, and so you will delete the previous partner's contact information so that this is no longer an option. This is pre-commitment to avoid someone. We also see in studies that people are getting closer to those that help them achieve their goals. Okay? So students are very strategic in choosing friends that will help them do well in school. Good students are popular because these are the people that will help you in your life. And so, moving away from some people and approaching other people, moving away from some foods and approaching other foods are all self-control strategies that are meant to take a goal and temptation that have a similar appeal and make the temptation significantly less appealing or less available than the goal. How much people are aware of it? Well, we find that they don't really need to be aware of it in order to do it. Okay? And so somehow in their development, people learn to do that. By the way, also animals sometimes display similar behaviors. So it doesn't seem like you really need high-level cognition in order to display some self-control, okay, some application of these strategies. But we hope that as people develop, as they learn, they can better plan. They are better able to do that. Let me also add something about habits. That we know that habits work well. Okay, you know that once you made something into a habit, then often it's going to kind of happen by itself. But then many behaviors are never completely habitual. Okay? And so while brushing your teeth is probably completely habitual, you don't need any willpower in order to get yourself to do that in the morning. Going to the gym, even if you are going on most mornings and you've been doing it for many years, is something that's much easier to drop. Okay, and that in a way, if you don't constantly reinforce the habit, it can disappear from your life more easily than brushing your teeth, for example. And so you get these behaviors where they constantly need to be supported. You constantly need to do something to motivate yourself to follow through.
So I guess some of these are kind of, you didn't use the term, but I think of them as kind of self-nudging, right? You know, you're using the nudge principle on yourself to some extent by kind of making the path of least resistance the thing that you most want to achieve. But you also talk about, and again, I don't think you used the term, but the idea of kind of self-signaling, right? And this idea that if you're doing something, well, you must like it, right? And so sometimes the best way to kind of get the ball rolling is just to start, right? You talk about some interesting research about how people don't necessarily know what they like, and so they can be kind of manipulated into liking certain things the way Tom Sawyer did, but they can also kind of manipulate themselves into kind of liking things and kind of Tom Sawyering themselves, right?
Yes. And well, first, we can think about self-nudging. I didn't use this expression, but I kind of like it. We do nudge ourselves. And we know from basically research that goes all the way to the beginning of social psychology as a field that people become to like what they do. Okay? That the processes such as dissonance and self-perception lead us to appreciate the things that we invested in. And so often the way to get yourself to do something is by first doing it and then learning to like it. Okay, and the idea is that when you do something, you ask yourself, why am I doing it? Okay, like why am I working so hard to get this graduate degree or to launch this successful product at work? And you become more committed by the fact that you look back and see yourself doing that. And this is another nice example of behaviors that we would consider maybe fallacies, maybe a healthy motivational tools, and this is the sunk cost effect, right? So sunk cost is considered a bias. You're not supposed to be working on something just because you invested in the past. You should look at what you expect to get from doing the activity, from pursuing the goal, and this is all that matters. Okay? You should not be in a relationship just because you've been in this relationship for many years. Okay? You should think about how do you value having this relationship moving forward, for example. But sunk cost results from a very effective motivational tool, which is that as we do something, we develop our commitment, which allows us to stick to some goal for a long time, which allows us to keep doing our work when we don't see immediate rewards, keep working on a paper that's really hard to publish, or that the studies take forever to run, and you stay committed because you think, well, I've already invested in this for 2 years, I might as well continue for a third year. And this is a motivational tool. This is learning from your commitment. You mentioned self-signaling. Self-signaling is often a motivational tool that refers to doing something because I want to be the kind of person that pursue this goal, okay? And so the reason to pursue goals is often because there are certain rewards associated with it, okay? I might want to get a job as a professor because I want to be employed, and I think that this is an amazing job to have. It's a wonderful lifestyle. Self-signaling is the other motivation, which comes from how that reflects on the self. Maybe it's not about the rewards, it's about how I'm going to see myself, okay? So I want to do it because it reflects well on me as a person. I want to think of myself as someone who's going to be a professor or an academic. And there are some studies that separate between these motivations, okay? So like one nice example is you manipulate whether people think that they will remember their action. Okay, if you think that you're going to have a good memory of what you did, then you're more likely to do it if you are like thinking about the self-signaling. Okay, if you think about how that reflects on who you are as a person. But whether you will remember your action or not really doesn't matter for the rewards that you're going to get from this action. So maybe this is a bit abstract. Let me give you an example. Whether you would choose the healthy snack over the unhealthy snack. If you are more likely to choose the healthy snack over the unhealthy snack when you expect to remember your action, for example, when it's like your first choice in the day, okay, as opposed to some choice in the middle, then we would conclude that you are mostly driven by self-signaling. Okay, you want to think of yourself as a health-conscious individual because eating healthy food will have the same impact on your body regardless of whether it's in the morning or at noon.
Right. Now, I always wonder with these healthy snacks, you always use chocolate as the unhealthy, and I'm always a little concerned about this because I always thought that chocolate was healthy. You guys must be using some terrible chocolate as an unhealthy option. But in terms of sunk cost fallacy, I mean, I use this all the time. I'll sign up for subscriptions, for instance, to the opera or to the symphony or to the theater, because on any given Friday night, after a long day of work, I'm not particularly thrilled to kind of go out. But because I spent that money on those tickets, I'm going to go. And so it's totally irrational for me to do it simply because I spent the money. But I know that I behave that way, and so I leverage that to become, the person that I want to be, or to do what I think is in my best interest in the long run, right? I mean, people do this all the time.
Yes. Okay. Well, first about chocolate. Okay. We not only we don't decide what people think is healthy or unhealthy. We often disagree. Okay? Like I have a study in which people were choosing whether to eat raisins or some chocolate, and the participants in our study thought that raisins are healthy. Okay, that this is fruit and chocolate is unhealthy. I personally don't think that there is anything in particular healthy about raisins. So I'm just interested in how people resolve self-control conflicts, how they choose their food. We have now a lot of work in like how people think about healthy food, and we often disagree. Like people think about healthy food as unprepared, okay, as the food that is served without spices. I don't think that there is anything that makes food healthier when you remove the spices, but I study how people think about food and how they make their choices. And then you are describing the tendency to plan highbrow activities and purchases long-term in advance, which is interesting, like how we need to pre-commit ourselves to have an experience that we know that we will value, but we might not want to initiate in the moment. And your example about pre-committing to going to the theater is wonderful. It shows how much it's often easier to exercise self-control in advance. Okay, in my research, I refer to this as counteractive self-control. You counteract the temptation before it's actually there. Okay, you decide to go to the theater before it's actually Tuesday at 6 p.m. and you are tired and you just want to watch TV. Okay, this is one example. Other example is that when we just remind people that there will be temptations, that the situation is going to be tense, then they are less likely to lose their temper, that there will be a lot of alcohol in the party, they are less likely to drink too much. If you know that there is going to be a problem, it's like, if you know that the box is going to be heavy and you're going to lift it, like your body is like preparing to physically lift it, your mind metaphorically does the same. Okay? If we know that something is going to be hard, we can better handle this in advance than when it's hard without a warning.
Well, I love that example that you made about how people tend to think that food is healthier if it's bland and unpleasant, right? And as somebody who cooks a lot, I find this makes no sense at all empirically, but I think it taps into what you talk about as sort of the dilution principle, or over justification effect. And I found this fascinating because in the world of marketing, you think, oh well, if I just add more and more features and I say, well, not only is it a floor cleaner, but it's also a mouthwash, then, you'd expect to sell more, right? But the implications of your research is that, no, actually, you're going to sell less because, people don't want something that works for everything. I mean, if I say I've got a moisturizer that works on your eyelids and your turkey neck, then you think, well, it can't be very good at either one. Right. So, why is it that we how do we, first of all, I'm interested in sort of the categories, where these categories come from, but why is it that we do that? I mean, is it in economics terms, it's almost as if everyone thinks that we're on the Pareto frontier all the time, and that there's no win-win available. That since everything, and indeed, if everything already was on the Pareto frontier, then the only way to get more in one dimension is to give up in the other dimension. But, we spend so much of our lives, inside the frontier, that someone comes along and says, hey, it's faster and cheaper and better. Sometimes it's true, right? But people are suspicious.
I'm still stuck on your example of a mouthwash that you can use to clean the floor. I am pretty sure that this is going to be a terrible marketing idea.
It's from an old Saturday Night Live skit in the 1970s. I remember some fake ad that they had on TV.
Yeah, so we know that this is not going to work, and this is exactly because of the dilution principle that if a means and an object, a product, an activity serves two goals, then you assume it is less instrumental for each of these goals. The psychology underlying it is pretty simple. It is less likely to bring to mind that goal. Okay, so like the delicious, healthy food that you have made is less likely to bring to mind healthy food. Okay, so the health category, and maybe also less likely to bring to mind the delicious category, okay, delicious food, and therefore it might seem less instrumental to each of them. Now, of course, this is a mistake in the sense that, this is an inference that you make based on the strengths of association between the means here and the goal. But in theory, a means can serve two goals. And there is no reason to think that if a food is healthy, is not tasty, or if a food is tasty, is unhealthy. When it gets to products design, it's often something that companies are giving a lot of thought of. Like, how can you keep it in the same category? Okay? And how can you expand the category without diluting your identity? Right? And there are many successful examples. Okay? Like the smartphone has like a bunch of categories in it that we have now as a society, as people, categorize under a smartphone. And so the same thing that I use to make calls, I also use as my calendar, and it seems as one function. But it takes some education, it takes time, it takes like realizing what new categories can be created. At any given time, there are many goals that we see as conflicting, or at least as like incongruent to some extent, like I mentioned, health and taste. We also see something that is like pleasurable versus important. That people say, well, if it's important, then I might not enjoy it as much, and like you see these conflicts. Now, as I talk about it, I'm being reminded of the old advertisement for cough medicine that went something like, it's awful and it works. Okay, like it tastes awful and it works, right? And the idea was that we know that people think that medicine that's bitter is more effective, and people also think that this is newer data, that mouthwash that stings is better, okay? And so these are like counter final activities, okay? So multi-final activities are activities that serve several goals at the same time. It's like, in my book, I refer to this as feeding two birds with one stone, because I don't like killing birds. And they are presumably the activities that we should look for. Okay, maybe we should walk to the gym instead of driving to the gym, so that we get our exercising and our way there in the same activity. But people often behave as if they want to separate, and the reason is that they believe that an activity is less instrumental for one goal if it's instrumental for the other goal. So, I use
like kosher ice cream, right?
Yeah, the question was, I use the example of driving to the gym and like trying to find a parking spot that is the closest to the door, right? Which we often do. And it's like, when we think about it, it doesn't make sense, because obviously I'm a person that wants to exercise. Why do I park very close to the entrance to the gym? The kosher ice cream is another one, and this is like Itamar Simonson's study from the 90s, reminding people that an ice cream is kosher made them think that it doesn't taste very good. It decreased their interest to the extent that they didn't care for kosher. Just adding that goal made people conclude that this ice cream is probably not so great in terms of taste. Okay, the other goal is being compromised.
Well, but doesn't that pose a bit of a puzzle, right? So suppose I want to be someone who is fit, so I want to exercise a lot. Now, I know that if I pick a fun exercise, I'm more likely to kind of do it. But if I pick an unfun exercise, then I'll maybe be able to convince myself that I am, more diligent in pursuit of my goal, right? So, is there any downside to picking the fun exercise? Will my motivation be undermined in some way because I'll doubt that I'm actually pursuing the goal of fitness?
Yeah, this is great. So there are a couple of advantages for the unfun exercise. Okay, one is that it seems more instrumental. Okay, like if you hate it, you assume that it's really great for your body. And the other one is that we talked about self-signaling. It's a great signal that you care about exercising. Okay, and so we know that runners see themselves as true runners when they run in Chicago in like a cold winter day. Okay, not when they are running in Berkeley on a nice spring day. But, and this is a big but, what predicts adherence to exercising is intrinsic motivation, which is really how much people enjoy that at the moment. And so despite the fact that doing something that doesn't feel comfortable might make you feel that this was very important for you and like a great exercise, you're actually less likely to come back again and then to do it maybe 4 times a week. And so overall, I would say that's not a great strategy. Finding an exercise that you enjoy doing, or not even increasing variety. Okay, what you enjoy doing yesterday might be boring today. Is really the way to get people to stick with the exercising goal.
Now, I think one of the more interesting parts of your book is your contribution to the millennium-old debate about kind of half full versus half empty. Right? I mean, this has been a debate, not whether it is half full or half empty, but sort of how you should look at things. Right? Should you focus on what has been accomplished to date, or should you focus on the distance ahead of you to achieve the goal? And I think this ties in many ways to the idea that the proximity to the goal is going to be in proximity to the starting point. These things influence your motivation, right? And you talk a bit about kind of the deadly middle, or when you're kind of there's sort of some spot where your motivation is probably kind of lowest. Could you talk a bit about, this seems like there's an entire field of motivation research. You could spend your entire lifetime just focusing on this one domain within motivation science.
Yeah, you were cut for a moment, so hopefully I'm answering the right question, but let me know if not. So there are a few things here. First, with progress, motivation increases. Okay, so in general, we see that the more people do, the more motivated they are. Okay, most people who drop out college do it in the first or second year, not when they're about to finish. Most consumers who are enrolled in a loyalty program drop the loyalty program after making one purchase, not when they are one purchase away from the reward. And there is a good reason, because you get more for your effort the more progress you have made. Okay? Your last year in college is getting you a full college degree. Your first year in college is getting you 25% of a college degree, of a 4-year college degree. And so there is just more that you get for your effort the more progress you have made, if it's an all or nothing.
Yes, so if it's a discontinuous reward structure, then that's certainly true, yeah. Right?
Yes. Now we also see that with progress, there is often more motivation for open-ended goals, and we discussed it before. Like your first exercise might feel difficult. It's a new exercise, but then after you did it a few times, you learn to like it. You look at yourself and you say, well, I guess I'm a committed swimmer. I'm going to continue swimming in my local swimming pool and so on. But we also see that often when people make progress, they use it as as a license to disengage. Okay, they feel like they've done enough. Okay, and so when I look back and I say, well, I've been working so hard today or this week, maybe I should take some time off. Okay, maybe when I consider the times that I already exercised, I feel like that I've exercised enough. I don't need to do it today, and then the glass half empty becomes more motivating. Okay, and then it's looking at the times that I haven't exercised, or the things that I didn't do at work. That's more motivating. And now we are getting to the interesting question of how should you monitor your progress? Should you look back and say, I've done that much, or look ahead and say, here's everything that I can still do? And to make things really simple and probably oversimplified, if you are new to something, if you are not committed, then it's better to look back and say, oh, I've already done some. Okay, if you're already committed, definitely if you are beyond the 50%, if it's an all or nothing goal, then it's better to look ahead at what you still need to do. Okay, and the idea is that looking back makes you more committed. And if that was the issue, if you didn't know whether you're truly committed to this thing, then look back, think about what you have done, that will increase your commitment. If you're already committed, now you are more sensitive to how much progress you're making and highlighting that you're farther from your goal. Like that makes you want to make this extra progress. Either way, there is a problem in the middle, okay? Because at the beginning, there is the enthusiasm of the beginning, and like any progress will feel relatively fast. Okay, I was at 0%, and I'm already at 5% or 10%. Toward the end, again, like you are almost there. And again, this is to the extent that the goal has an end, okay? That it's all or nothing goal. Then, it's my last class in college, okay? It's the last purchase before I get the reward. People are excited about finishing their goals, and in the middle, this is when we see a problem, and we see it when we look at physical performance, when we look at like runners or swimmers, they are slowing down in the middle. When we look at students, the middle of the quarter is usually when they are more likely to skip class or skip their homework. And even for our own ongoing goals, like the middle of the week, the middle of the days, when we kind of relax. And so the solution is probably to keep middles short.
Right. So does that sort of then do you have to trick yourself into kind of? I mean, you talk about cutting corners and how people tend to, be less ethical, sort of in the middle, and maybe they're thinking that whoever's observing their work isn't going to notice because it's kind of buried in the middle. Maybe they themselves think that they're not going to notice because it's kind of buried in the middle. So when you say make the middles short, does that mean to kind of subdivide the kind of progress bar, so to speak, to provide intermediate kind of almost artificial completions along the way, so that you can say, I've completed. I think in terms of in American football, right? When you go 10 yards, you get a new set of downs, right? So it's like, I've got a fresh start. Like I'm done, right? There's first, second, third down, and now it's first down again. So by slicing the field up into 10-yard increments, you're almost making those middles much shorter than they would be otherwise, right?
Yes. So you nicely illustrated another two problems with middles. Not only we are doing less, okay, we are also cutting corners, okay, that is we are doing things less in the right way, okay, we are less ethical, and we are less ethical and less likely to adhere to our performance standard, both because we think that other people will not notice and we think that we will not remember. Right? Like if I don't remember what I do in the middle, then I don't need to pay attention.
You mentioned on vacations, people remember the first day and the last day more than they remember, the middle day.
Yes, and so you need like your first and last day to like do something special, right? In the middle, if you don't think that you will remember, then you don't care so much. We did one study with Wilmot Artillery where we gave people a piece of paper with shapes on it and a pair of scissors to cut these shapes, and they were literally cutting corners in the middle. Okay, but when you talk about the solution of cutting the goal to sub goals, I think that we all do it all the time. Okay, like take savings, like savings for retirement. It's a really long-term goal. Okay, but we often think about how much we save this year. Okay, so we make this dozens of years goal into maybe a 1 year sub goal, which is probably still too long. It's probably better to think about savings in terms of a monthly goal. Exercising. We are encouraged to monitor how much we exercise per day. Okay, so we have a daily goal. Like, what does it mean? And of course, like tomorrow will be another daily goal, and every day I want to exercise, but I don't think about how much I work out this year or this decade. I think about how much I work out today, which is a sub goal that has no middle.
But you also talk about the what the hell effect, right? Which is you miss a goal, and if you have a all or nothing goal, then missing it by a little and missing it by a lot, shouldn't make a whole heck of a lot of difference. So if you really say, I need to do this, I need to lose 10 pounds. I'm not going to be happy with 9 pounds. I'm not going to be happy with 9.9 pounds. I got to lose 10 pounds. Then as soon as you realize it's not going to happen, then why not, miss by 10 pounds, right? How do you then all of a sudden switch back to convincing yourself that, 9.9 is better than 7 when you had spent all this time trying to convince yourself that you needed to make it to 10? I mean, if you could kind of switch back and forth between those two perspectives, then it would sort of make the all or nothing way of thinking more difficult to sustain, no?
Yeah, and you highlight one of the problems with goals. Okay, so we set goals that are ambitious. We set goals that we don't know if we can reach this specific target. Okay, we don't know if we can do like this much by that time. And we did that on purpose. Okay, the challenging target is better than the target that we know we can achieve for sure. But the problem is that once we fail on that target, then we might give up. Okay, we might say like whatever, like what the hell. Okay, like the day is ruined, or maybe the goal is ruined. There is a nice study that looks at the distribution of marathon times in the U.S. It's like almost 10 million marathon times. Devin Pop and George Wu here were colleagues. There were more people on this paper. Well, let me say it again. Devin Pop and George Wu, who are my colleagues here at the University of Chicago, were on that paper with more authors. And if you look at the distribution of marathon times, there are many more people in the U.S. that finish a marathon just below 4 hours than just above 4 hours. Okay, so the distribution is not smooth. Now, it's a nice effect of I'm losing my language. Now, it's a nice demonstration of the motivating effect of goal setting, because many marathon runners want to achieve their goal under 4 hours, okay? Finish the marathon under 4 hours. You see that there are many people there. But it's interesting to note that, when you see that there are very few people that are finishing the marathon just over 4 hours, it's possible that at least some of them, once they realize that they are not doing it under 4 hours, they kind of gave up, okay? And now they are taking some extra time, okay? And now they are not finishing in 4 hours and 2 minutes because, if I cannot finish it under 4 hours, I might as well finish it in 4 hours and 20 or 30 minutes. We see this with food all the time, that if people just miss it by a little, they completely go off track and just eat whatever is in the fridge. We see that with exercising, people that have a step count, they would really care about getting to the 10,000 steps a day. So if they're just 100 steps below that, they will walk around their bedroom trying to get the last 100 steps. But if the day is ruined, if let's say I did like a flight that day, which means that my step count is going to be pretty low, then they don't even bother, okay? Like if I can get to 10,000, I might as well just sit in my chair for the entire day, which is the downside of goal setting, that when you give up, you might be really giving up.
You see the same thing with corporate earnings, right? So when you beat earnings announcement, you beat them by like a penny. When you beat forecasted earnings, but when you miss it, you can kind of miss it by a lot. So the last thing I want to ask you about is emotions, and you talk about how important emotions are. And of course, emotions can be, created by the judgment of others, right? So as managers, right, we think a lot about, do you want to motivate your employees with, kind of fear or love. And but the same applies when you're trying to kind of motivate yourself, right? So if you make yourself feel really bad, okay, that's going to have a certain impact. And if you make yourself kind of feel, really good, and the area where I think you dig deep into this is sort of how negative feedback affects people, right? And how it can either be a motivator or a demotivator, depending in part on the emotional impact that it has. So, how should we, if we're trying to motivate ourselves, how can we leverage our emotions? I mean, is it okay to kind of make yourself feel bad for, failing to perform? Is there a good way to do that? How do you use positive and negative feedback on yourself to inspire motivation?
So emotions in motivation science, we often think about emotions as feedback system. And I often find it confusing, because emotions can be the goal in its own. Okay, like many people say, like that my goal is to feel happy. Okay, but I believe that it's more accurate to think about happiness or pride or satisfaction or anxiety or fear or depression as feedback. Okay, as feedback to how are you doing in your life, and how should you change what you're doing or keep it up. And the extent to which you have emotions such as regret or pride, that usually directly about how well you are doing on your goals. Okay, like regret means that you didn't do something that you thought you should have done. Okay, so that's a cue to engage in this behavior. Pride is kind of the signal, the internal signal that you're doing well on your self-control goal. So you did something that was more important, that you prioritized over another goal. So both are informative, but what we find that in general is that people are struggling to learn from negative feedback, and specifically from negative emotions. There are several reasons for that. Okay, when it gets to negative emotions, often what you do is take care of the emotion and not the goal. Okay, and that means
you try to deflect it, right?
Yeah. Okay, that means if I'm trying not to feel bad, I might not pursue the goal. I might just find a shortcut not to feel
or
bad.
you might cover up the signal which leading to the negative emotion, right? So if you if you see if you're dealing with the work situation, if you see an email where you think that someone's going to be giving you a hard time for your work, you just kind of don't open it, right?
Yes, okay, so you can ignore it in the first place, right? You can ignore negative feedback by knowing that it's coming and never opening the email. You can also find shortcuts to improve your mood, right? Like substance abuse, right? Like, there are ways in which we can improve our mood that don't actually address the goal. There are also the two specific barriers to learning from negative feedback. One is that it hurts, and the other one is that it's often hard just cognitively to learn from negative feedback. And no, the hurting part is easy to understand. Okay, when we fail or when we get negative feedback, it stings. Okay, it's one reason, by the way, why we sometimes learn more from others' failures than from our own. Okay? When I observe you messing up, it's easy for me to learn. When I mess up, I might disengage. But also cognitively learning from failure is often hard because it requires learning what not to do, is learning by elimination. And this extra cognitive step, if it's that not the right way, then I should look at the other way, is often a huge barrier. Okay, we did studies in which we ask people whether you in a world in which there are three options. Okay, there's like big success, small success, and small failure. What do you want to know? Okay, do you want to experience like the small success, or the small failure? So presumably we cannot tell you where the big success is, but if you know one of the other two, then you can kind of by elimination figure out where to go. And what we find is that many people say that they want to learn about the small success, whereas the correct answer is that you want to know about the small failure. Okay, if you know about where the small failure is, now you have a better chance at getting the big success, because you will now be randomly choosing between small success and a large success. But people don't quite take this extra step. Okay, they don't think about the information that was in the failure, and so they don't explore it. They don't want to get this information. We also find that people don't share information on failure with other people, and probably because it's not something that people proud of. They don't want to broadcast things that didn't work well, but what it means that there is just less information that we can learn from. Okay, there is just less in the market of ideas. Okay, and the wisdom of the crowd. There is less information on learning from failure because people don't talk about it.
So here in Silicon Valley, venture capitalists are always evaluating founders and ideas, and I think when I ask them kind of what are they looking for, it seems like in many cases what they're really looking for is a founder that has kind of the right kind of motivation. And when you dig deep into that, you say, well, what exactly are you looking for? They sort of say, well, I want someone who is going to essentially walk through walls and is willing to light themselves on fire in order to achieve a goal. And you say, oh, so you want someone who's stubborn, and someone who is is going to ignore bad feedback and ignore the pitfalls on the way. And they say no, actually we want them to be flexible and be willing to pivot all the time. And so when you're trying to figure, well, how can you have somebody who wants to walk through walls to achieve a goal, but is also willing to abandon goals and pivot all the time? I think it lines up in many ways with what you're describing, which is really the ability to understand, right, kind of how to define and understand goal formation in a way that facilitates flexibility on the way to the achievement of those goals.
Yes, and I like this story because you really want the person that is learning from their setbacks, that expect many setbacks, right? And so we know that either in like Silicon Valley in developing technology or in science, you have a lot of setbacks. Most of your ideas, or at least most of the ways in which you test your ideas, are going to lead to nowhere. And the question is whether the person is learning from that. Now, learning from that, the fear is that what you learn is that you cannot, okay, that will never work, right? So learned helplessness is also learning. Okay, learned helplessness is when you learn that you cannot do this, okay, that because I gave you a negative feedback on whatever, okay, you took my class in social psychology and you got negative feedback. You learned that you can never be a social psychologist. This is learning, but the wrong kind of learning. Okay? This is overgeneralized belief that you cannot do something. This is something that Martin Seligman showed many years ago, led dogs not to avoid electric shocks because they had the bad experience of being in an environment in which you couldn't control electric shocks. Between like that overgeneralized learning and not learning anything, okay, which is just ignoring failures and not doing the elimination process that I just described, that I just learned about one way in which that doesn't work. You get a healthy learning, which is there is still a lot to explore. There is still a lot to do here. I just discovered what doesn't work, and I'm going to try the next thing that might work or not. And the people that you talk to in Silicon Valley, if they know what they are looking for, then hopefully it's that person.
Well, Ayelet, thank you so much for joining me. The book here is Get It Done, Surprising Lessons from the Science of Motivation. It really walks through quite a wide range of interesting insights and studies. Thanks for joining me.
Thank you, Greg. It's a pleasure.
This is Unsiloed, brought to you by Alumni FM, connecting people through stories.